Hello and welcome to another video. And today I'm going to be going over the events of July 13th. And today's been much more of an active day on the front lines, juxtaposed to the past few days. So I think this is indicative of heating up of the war effort. You're starting to see some major battles, so we'll get right into that. First, I want to go over some major events around the Kherson front. So in Mykolaiv, the Russian Ministry of Defense, and take that whatever they say with a grain of salt, but they're reporting that they struck Nikolaev, and I've been talking about these strikes for a while now. Every day there's like 20 explosions in the city, especially in the eastern industrial sector of the city. Actually western, but anyway, they say that these strikes have killed 420 soldiers, 300, actually 30 military vehicles destroyed, 4 ammo depots destroyed, and then 80 self-propelled howitzers destroyed. So that's a lot. And the fact that Ukraine has so much of these military targets embedded in Mykolaiv, that shows that they're starting to stockpile either for the defense of the city or potentially for a future attack directed towards Kherson. And that would sort of go along with what's going on in Kryvyi, because there are all these reports of some like reserve units being moved to the city. People are talking about some of the troops from the Donbass actually being moved towards the city for a future offensive, attacking Russia's northern flank around here. So that's pretty interesting because this isn't the best time for Ukraine to be diverting resources away from the Donbass front. So maybe it's supposed to be a distraction. We're also seeing that a lot of HIMARS are being stationed in the city. We're seeing M777 howitzers being moved in. All this like NATO equipment, some of the best technology that they have is being moved into the city. So I do think that this city specifically is going to be of importance for Ukraine. So we'll see how that goes. But the main sector of fighting that I want to get into right now is obviously Donetsk, where especially today there's been a lot of heavy clashes around the outskirts of Bakhmut, and specifically we know in Pokrovsk the fighting continues. We have reports of intense fighting in the town itself. And now we're even hearing reports of clashes in Vesela Dolina. I don't know. I can't confirm this just yet, but it would sort of fit with the reports of the front lines inching closer and closer to Bakhmut. And of course, Rishina, I'm just going to say it's probably under Russian control. So we have the southern towns being attacked by Russia. But despite all of this, we're not seeing any withdrawals of Ukrainian troops from their sort of bulge around here, mainly centered around the Uglyagarsk power plants. We're not seeing anything change here. Even though there's been really heavy shelling of this power plant, we're not seeing any withdrawals to like around here, as I talked about yesterday. We're not seeing any changes. So I feel like Ukraine has dug in their heels into this area, and they don't really have an intention of leaving just yet. But we might see a quick Ukrainian withdrawal from Bakhmut whenever that battle starts, just as we've seen in a lot of these other industrial areas, industrial cities. The only city where, well, there have been a few cities where there has been a protracted Ukrainian defense. The three that come to mind are Mariupol, Pasnaya, and Rubizhny. But first of all, those were earlier on in the war when Ukraine, they had more men expendable, and now we're seeing a shift from that strategy as the Ukrainians withdrew from Severodonetsk without being scathed that much, and the same thing with Lysychansk. Like, there haven't been many prisoners taken, maybe a few hundred, but for the most part, the 30,000 or so Ukrainian troops holding this front line, which is pretty extended, especially because of the southern bulge I was talking about over here. They're mostly intact, so we might see Ukraine wanting to continue this trend as the Russians continue to advance. They won't want to lose any more men than they're losing now, because there are a lot of obituary records, and they're showing that a high amount of Ukrainian troops are dying, and it's getting to a certain magnitude that is unparalleled um, at any point in this war. So that's not looking good for Ukraine. So maybe once like the Russians coalesce around the southern front and then attack Bakhmut head on, you will see Ukraine perhaps withdraw towards this city around here, and then like build this defensive line, a new one, which is also overextended. This line is about equal to the current line in terms of like kilometers. Like, the length isn't much different. So that's a problem for Ukraine. They're gonna have to be able to find a suitable defensive line, and they can't just keep getting pushed back and back further to the west. But yeah, we could see this happening because of the previous trends with other battles. We could see a quick Ukrainian withdrawal from Bakhmut without much blood spilled, and that sort of goes hand in hand with what's going on around Soledar. Today there were reports, some pretty crazy reports, that Russia actually had control over like half of Soledar already, and I think they were talking about the northern portion, the pro-Russian sources that were covering this. I don't have the original post up now, but I would say it's an overestimation that Russia has 50% of Soledar, given that it is a pretty important town. But I could see the reports being true that Russia is attacking from the north, because there were reports like a week ago of Russia taking Yakovlivka. So let's say they actually did. They could sort of flank Soledar from the north and then like occupy everything around here as they concurrently attack from their new positions in Nova Kamyanka. Speaking of which, Nova Kamyanka, now we know for sure that it's under Russian control, but it's highly likely that for these past few weeks it was actually under Ukrainian control. So I apologize for having that marked as red. But there were a lot of reputable sources that put it as red as well. And of course, I'm not there on the front lines myself. And Russia did actually have control of the town for a while, but the theory is that they probably withdrew because they didn't have enough manpower to hold these forward positions. But now we know for sure that all of these towns that are east of Soledar, they're firmly under Russian control, and that it's possible by now that Russia has already reached this main road leading from Soledar to Bakhmut. They probably did, and they might even be infiltrating the first residential areas around here on the eastern periphery of the town. But we're gonna have to see about that. Do expect some more reports from the city in the upcoming days. And now let's move on to some other big events. So Russia, they've been striking pretty hard all across the Donetsk front. Just today, a few hours ago, there were strikes reported on Slavyansk, and there was a strike on Kramatorsk, mainly on the industrial centers in these areas. We even know that in Chasiv Yar, the death count from those shellings has went up to 46 people. I don't know if these are civilians or military personnel, but either way, it does show that these towns are being hit very hard, and I only see it getting harder and harder as Russia gears up for this next round of battles because they've taken the past 11 days or so to like coalesce their gains, as I've been talking about for a while. And that's understandable because the battles in Severodonetsk and Lysychansk, they were pretty intense. But yeah, they've had some time to recuperate, and now we're already seeing some more action around here. We're seeing action in Berestove. I know there was some fighting reported around here. We might see this town fall in the near future, and then like once these towns around here, these three towns, once Russia has a firm control over them, which they've been fighting pretty hard in this area for like a few months now. So we will see them fall soon as the rest of the front line collapses. We will see a major Russian advance around southern part of, like right south of Siversk, around all these open fields, and then like inevitably towards these roads around here, with all these other like sparsely populated towns. And that gets us into the events in Siversk itself. So, according to TASS, which is a Russian source, there's actually fighting going on within Siversk itself, which is pretty big because I know I was talking about yesterday about fighting going on the outskirts, but now they're actually infiltrating the city itself. We'll see how long it takes for Russia to actually secure the town fully because it is pretty large. It has had like a population of 10,000 before the war, which is pretty big uh, in the context of this war. I don't know how much of Siversk, if any of it, is actually under Russian control, or if that's just like some preliminary reports that will be true maybe in a few days, but not yet. Maybe they're talking about like the environs of Siversk, but not Siversk itself. There hasn't been any imagery from Siversk, but I do know that there was some imagery from these like open fields around here. I saw on Telegram. It was pretty graphic, so I'm not gonna show it here, but it just shows like dead Ukrainian service members, and it's not in any like urban dwelling or anything. You can clearly see it's in a like forested area or like open fields, like not in any cities. So maybe that indicates that the fighting has shifted since the posting of that photo, like 18 hours ago. Also, I want to look at the NASA firms map for a second and just look at how the fires have shifted. So you can see there used to be a lot of fires around here because this is Lysychansk, obviously. Now most of that has died down. You're still seeing a few fires, like right on the border between Donetsk and Lugansk, but for the most part they've dissipated. You're also seeing some fires here in or Kamianske, I think that's how you say it. But I'm pretty sure that these are just old fires because if the fighting is already in the Siversk or its outskirts, then this town should already be under Russian control. We're also seeing a lot of fires right here in the southern, right south of Siversk. So that's pretty interesting. You're also seeing these fires northeast of Siversk and just south of Serebryanka. Who knows? Maybe Serebryanka is being infiltrated right now by Russian forces as we're speaking. And then, I've talked about this before, but then they could just flank the Ukrainians from the north and sort of get them to withdraw back to Slavyansk. I've been talking about that for a while. So let's go back to the map now. And yeah, that's it for the Siversk front. I don't have too much information on the ongoing battles there, but we probably will have some more information about that tomorrow. So I'll update you about that when I get the chance. Now, one more thing that I do want to talk about is the situation here with the situation here with Slavyansk and all of that. So there has been some Ukrainian reports that this town, Ivanivka, I'll show it on the map here. Ivanivka, this one. That Ivanivka, there's been clashes reported there, and this is Ukrainian sources. So that's saying something, because if the Ukrainian sources are reporting it, uh, and it would be indicative of a major Russian gain, then it's probably true. So I will change the map right after this video just to indicate that the fighting has shifted all the way down south to Ivanivka, which is already a pretty big deal, because it does sort of explains sort of the Russian strategy in this sector, because even though they don't have many men here, because most of them are situated on the Siversk, Soledar, Bakhmut fronts, it does show that they're still making some minor gains right like southwest of Krasnopelia, which is pretty heavily fortified. So we could see sort of like this bypassing of all of those Ukrainian agglomerations, and then like an attack on Slavyansk from the west, and then like a concurrent sort of like flanking operation on the Dolina and Krasnopelia. We could see that. I think that's very likely once the Russians finish up with Soledar and Siversk. And that's it for now. There hasn't been much going on in Kharkiv that I can talk about, besides the fact that there's been like a lot of strikes from the Russians and counter strikes from the Ukrainians on all these towns. Um, the entry and exits from some of these settlements on the front lines are being closed, specifically in Uri and Zolochev. And there are huge shortages in humanitarian aid to this area, which is a pretty big deal. So let's hope that gets fixed. But honestly, besides that, there's nothing much to say. So thank you everybody for watching, and I'll see you tomorrow.